Zero views. Hey guys, hi everybody. So today I'm gonna start my first day of challenge. So in this challenge, I'm gonna read a book in front of you. Like as you can see here, like there is one book which is open, and I've been reading this book since 2 days. So it's like almost been finished, but like I'm not starting it in like since starting because I've been reading this book like 2 days ago, and it's been 2 days that I'll be almost completing this book. So once it is complete, then you'll be able to find a new book series, not a book series actually, that will be a new book that I'm going to read in front of you. And like I'm having screen here, shared screen. First of all, let me tell you one thing, that my communication skill is not that much good. Like I'm also same like you, but I have taken some challenges that will improve myself in order to like have good life. Like I don't know what I'm saying, but it's like totally complete new challenge for me. So I'm just starting challenges. Like I can show there are 3 challenges that I've been working on that I'm going to do for this particular time right now. Like the first challenge that I'm showing, it is related to the reading every day. Like it's been 23 days now, I guess. Let me show you. As you can see my screen, I have one another screen from where I can show you like how long I have been reading. So here you can see this is my brand, the story of you. This book I've been reading, some of book I have already finished. But what I'm trying to say here, I have started this challenge before 23 day ago, and it's been 23 days that I've been doing same challenge with me. But I thought let's take this on YouTube so that people can also see, people can also read, people can also like take inspiration from me, and they can also start reading a book, as well as they can start not only reading a book but having challenges in their life so that they can improve day by day. Like me, I personally think that I am improving day by day. So just because of that, I thought let's take my life, not a life, like whatever I'm going to do in order to improve myself, just take though that thing to the YouTube so that people can see how I am improving. And if they feel it helpful, then definitely they are also gonna implement same thing in their life, and they will also grow. Like me, I think of myself as I'm going, so that is why like I have created this YouTube channel and thought that let's do something so that people can also like grow in their life if they are stuck somewhere else. So that is my basic purpose of this YouTube channel, as well as like here you'll be basically find challenges and self improvement things only. So that's all about for my introduction. There is one more thing that I want to say, how I am tracking these things. I have one another application. Let me show you what is the application name is. Its name is uh, toggle track. So you can track your time every day, like where you are spending your time, then where you are spending your complete time, you will be able to track that time. So it's toggle tracked. For now I'm not showing it. If you want me to show that, I'll like let me know in comments or somewhere. Like I'm very new to YouTube, but I have very excitement to like have YouTube channel, and I know that if I'm gonna give something to people like a value, then definitely you like then definitely it will grow. Because if you are providing value to people, then definitely that thing will eventually like return something to you, like you are gonna get something from it. So without any delaying minutes, let's start our reading habit from today. For me it's 24th day, but for you it's a first day. So I've been I'm going to read this same book. Sorry for that, but if you want me to read this book again, I will start reading it again. Just let me know about. But first, you can check like how I'm reading, and let me know like if you want me to read it again. Then definitely I'm going to read it. My throat is like getting dry. I don't know why, just because of some hesitation, I guess. But I'm gonna do it because this is my challenge, and definitely I'm gonna crack this. I'm gonna nail this. So I don't know how this is going to be happening. There are some of the things that in my body language it's not good, but definitely after a certain period of time there are lots of things that I'm going to improve in myself. You will also able to see in my videos. That is why I'm just recording as it is, like whatever I'm now, whatever I'm today, I want to show that, and after a certain period of time I know that it will be better because our brain eventually learns the things and it works. So that is the thing. So let's start reading without delaying in a minute, as I already told. So right now I'm reading here. So I'm gonna read and you're gonna listen or you're gonna see. So it depends on the thing how like it depends on the your comments what you want from me. So I'm gonna do the same thing. That's whole show in a short. Oh, I've read it. Sorry for it. So I've been reading here the subtle signals around us. As we grow, our social challenges become more subtle and complex. Beyond words and actions, we have to interpret inflection, facial expressions, body language. While we are consciously concentrating on what we are discussing, our brain machinery is busy processing complex information. The operations are so instinctive and they are essentially invisible. So here it is just basically explaining our brain's function, that how it works. Even if we are doing something in our like, even if I am talking to you, but in my brain there are some of the activities that is going very complex. It's like ongoing. That is just explaining. There is one more thing I want to say. If I'm reading a book, then my like light, just because of that it went off. So I'm going to start. So I'm going to start reading now. So here, over where I was. So this is my book. Might be you'll be able to see it. I can expand it to fully, but before that I have to check it. Ah, okay. That's amazing. I'm reading it now. It's going good. And I'm going here. But I'm unable to. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, there is something like I'm having monitors, so just because of that, it's not kind of working right now. Let me. Something went wrong. It was discard. Let me share my screen again so that you'll be able to see. Yes, it's already working. There is something that is going very crazy. Literally fortunately my power came back. I'm gonna start it. Sorry for delay. I'll cut it off, but I'll see. Oh, something is really going very bad. I have to. So this is my book. No, it's here. So we have completed these. So it's been complete. So I was asking that if you want me to explain the things, then definitely I am going to do. But first of all, today I'm just going to read the book. That's all. So here, let's read these. Autism. There are some of the words that I also don't know, so I'll be looking into. Like here itself, what does it mean by autism? If I want to look it, I can just right click on it, because on Mac OS, like it's the feature, and I'll be able to understand what does it mean by autism. Neurodevelopmental condition of variable severity with lifelong effects that can recognize from each childhood, chiefly characterized by difficulties with social interaction and communications, and by restricted or repetitive pattern of thought and behavior. So that is the thing. So what does it mean by autism? Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder which affects 1% of the population, although it's established that both genetic and environmental causes underpin its development. The number of individuals diagnosed with autism has been on the rise in recent years, with little to no evidence explaining this increase in people not affected by autism. Many regions of the brain are involved in searching for social cues about the feelings and thoughts of others. In autism, this brain activity is not seen as strongly, and this is paralleled by diminished social skill. Often, the best way to appreciate something is to see what the world looks like when it's missing. Now, for a man named John Robinson, the normal activity of the social brain was something he was simply unaware of as he grew up. He was bullied and rejected by other children, but found love of machines. As he describes it, he could spend time with a tractor and it wouldn't tease him. I guess I learned how to make friends with the machines before I made friends with other people, he says. In time, John's affinity for technology took him to places his bullies could only dream of. By 21, he was a roadie for the band Kiss. However, even while surrounded by legendary rock and roll access, his outlook remained different from others. When people would ask him about the different musicians and what they were like, John would respond by explaining how they had played a Sun Coliseum. Now, with seven bass amps chained together, he would explain that there were 2200 watts in the bass systems, and could enumerate the amplifiers and what the crossover frequencies were. But he couldn't tell you a thing about the musician who sang through them. He lived in a world of technology and equipment. It wasn't until he was 40 that John was diagnosed with Asperger's, a form of autism. Then something happened that transformed John's life. In 2008, he was invited to take part in an experiment at Harvard Medical School. A team led by Dr. Alvaro Pascaliano was using transcranial magnetic stimulation to assess how activity in one area of the brain affected activity in another area. TMS emits a strong magnetic pulse next to the head, which is in turn induced a small electric electric current in the brain, temporarily disrupting local brain activity. The experiment was meant to help the researcher gain great knowledge about the autistic brain. The team used TMS to target different regions of John's brain involved in higher order cognitive functions. At first, John reported the stimulation had no effect, but in one session, the researchers applied TMS to the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, an evolutionary recent part of the brain involved in flexible thinking and abstraction. John reported that he somehow became different. Cognitive function at first. John reported the stimulation had no effect. But in one session, the researcher applied TMS to the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and an evolutionary recent part of the brain involved in flexible thinking and abstraction. John reported that he somehow became different. John called up Dr. Pascal Leon to let him know that the effect of these stimulations seemed to have unlocked something in him. The effects lasted beyond the experiment itself. John reported. Now, for John, it had opened up a whole new window onto the social world. He simply didn't realize that there were messages emanating from the facial expression of the other people. No, but after the experiment, he was now aware of those messages. Now, to John, his experience of the world was now changed. Pascal Leone was skeptical. He figured if the effects were real, they wouldn't last. Given that the effects of TMS typically persist only a few minutes to hours. Now, the Pascal Leon does not fully understand what happened. He allows that the stimulation seems to have fundamentally changed John. In the social realm, John went from experiencing black and white to full color. He now sees a communication channel that he was never able to detect before. John's story isn't simply about hope for new treatment techniques for autism spectrum disorder. It reveals the importance of the unconscious machinery running under the hood. Every moment of our waking lives devoted to social connections, brain circuitry that continuously decodes the emotions of others based on subtle facial, auditory, and other sensory cues. Now, I knew that people could display signs of crazed anger, he says. Now, but if you asked about more subtle expression, like I think your heart's sweet, or I wonder what you are hiding, or I'd really like to do that, or I wish you would do this. No, I had no idea about things like that. Every moment of our lives, our brain circuitry records the emotions of others based on extremely subtle facial cues. To better understand how we read faces so rapidly and automatically, I invited a group of people to my lab. We placed two electrodes on their faces, one of the forehead, one on the forehead and one on the cheek to measure small changes in their expression. Then we had them look at photographs of faces. When participants looked at a photo that showed, say, a smile or a frown, we were able to measure short period of electrical activity that indicated their own facial muscles were moving, often very subtly. This is because of something called mirroring. They were automatically using their own facial muscles to copy the expression they were seeing. A smile was reflected by a smile, even if the movement of their muscle was to slide to be visually obvious without meaning to people app one another. This mirroring sheds a light on a strange fact. Couples who are married for a long time begin to resemble each other, and the longer they have been married, the stronger the effect. Research suggests this is not simply because they adopt the same clothes or hairstyle, but because they have been mirroring each other's faces for so many years that their patterns of wrinkles start to look the same. Now, why do we mirror? Does it serve a purpose? Now, to find out, I invited a second group of people to lab similar to the first group, except for one thing. This new group of people had been exposed to the now most lethal toxin on the planet. If we were to ingest even a few drops of this neurotoxin, your brain could no longer command your muscle to contract, and you would die from paralysis. Specifically, you would die from would no longer be able to move, and you would suffocate. Given these facts, it seems unlikely that people would pay to have this injected into themselves, but they do. This is the botulinum toxin derived from a bacterium and its cells. But they do. This is the botulinum toxin derived from a bacterium, and it's commonly marked under the brand name Botox. When injected into facial muscles, it paralyzes them and thereby reduces wrinkles. However, Benefits: there is a less known side effect of Botox. Now we showed Botox users the same set of photos. Their facial muscles their facial muscles showed less mirroring on or electromyogram. No surprise there. Their muscles have been purposely weakened. The surprise was something else, originally reported in 2011 by David Neal and Tanya Chartrand. Similar to their original experiment, I asked participants from both groups, Botox and non-Botox, to look at expressive faces and to choose which of four words they described the emotions shown. On average, those with Botox were worse at identifying the emotions in pictures correctly. Why? One hypothesis suggests that the lack of feedback from their facial muscles impaired their ability to read other people. We all know that the less mobile faces of Botox users can make it hard to tell what they are feeling. The surprise is that those same frozen muscles can make it hard for them to read others. Here is a way to think about this result. Now, my facial muscles reflect what I am feeling, and your neural machinery takes advantage of that. Now, when you are trying to understand what I am feeling, you try on my facial expression. You don't mean to do it. It happens rapidly and unconsciously. But that automatic mirroring of my expression gives you a rapid estimate of what I am likely to be feeling. This is a powerful trick for your brain to gain a better understanding of me and make better predictions about what I'll do. As it turns out, it's just one trick of many. The joys and sorrows of empathy. Now we go to the movies to escape into worlds of love and heartbreaks and adventure and fear. But the heroes and villains are just actors projected in two dimensions on a screen. So why should we care at all about what happened to those fleeting fandoms? Now why do movies make us weep, laugh and gasp? To understand why you care about the actors, let's begin with what happens in your brain when you are in pain. Imagine that someone stabs your hand with a syringe needle. There is no single place in the brain where that pain is processed. Instead, the event activates several different areas of the brain, all operating in concert. This network is summarized as the pain matrix. Here is the surprising part. The pain matrix is crucial to how we connect with others. If it was somebody else gets stabbed, now most of your pain matrix becomes activated. Not those areas that tell you you have actually been touched, but instead those parts involved in the emotional experience of pain. In other words, watching someone else in a pain and being in a pain, I use the same neural machinery. Now this is the basis of empathy. To emphasize with another person is to literally feel their pain. You run a compelling simulation of what it would be like if you were in that situation. Our capacity for this is why stories like movies and novels are so absorbing and so pervasive across human culture. Whether it's about total strangers or made up characters, you experience their agony and their ecstasy. You fluidly become them, live their lives, and stand in their vantage points. When you see another person suffer, you can try to tell yourself that it's their issue, not yours. But neurons deep in your brain can't tell the difference. This built-in facility to feel another person's pain is part of what makes us so good at stepping out of our shoes and into their shoes. Neurally speaking, but why do we have this facility in the first place? From an evolutionary point of view, empathy is a useful skill. By gaining a better grasp of what someone is feeling, it gives a better prediction about what they'll do next. However, the accuracy of empathy is limited, and in many cases, we simply project ourselves onto others. Take as an example Susan Smith, a mother in a South Carolina, who in 1994 kindled the empathy of nations when she reported to the police that she had been carjacked by a man who drove away with her sons still in the car. For 9 days, she played on national television for the rescue and return of her boys. Strangers around the nation offered help and support. Eventually, Susan Smith confessed to the murder of her own children. Everyone had fallen for her story of carjacking, of the carjacking, because her real act was so outside the realm of normal prediction. Although the details of her case are all reasonably obvious in retrospect. Obvious in retrospect, they were difficult to see at the time because we typically interpret other people from the vantage point of who we are and what we are capable of. We can't help but simulate others, connect with others, care about others because we are hardwired to be social creature. That raises a question: are our brains dependent on social interactions? What would happen if the brain were starved of human contact? In 2009, peace activist Sarah Short and her two companions were hiking in the mountains of northern Iraq, an area that was at that time peaceful. They followed recommendations from local to see the Ahmad Ava waterfall. Unfortunately, this waterfall was located at the Iraqi border with Iran. They were arrested by Iranian border guards on suspicion of being American spies. The two men were put in the same cell, but Sarah was separated from them in solitary confinement, with the exception of two 30-minute periods each day. She spent the next 410 days in an isolated cell. In Sarah's words, in the early weeks and months of solitary confinement, you are reduced to an animal like state. You are an animal in a cage, and the majority of your hours are spent pacing, and the animal like state eventually transforms into a more plant like state. Your mind starts to slow down, and your thoughts become repetitive. Your brain turns on itself and becomes the source of your worst pain and your worst torture. I would relive every moment of my life, and eventually, you run out of memories. You have told them all to yourself so many times, and it doesn't take that long. I need to drink water because it's like very drying up my throat. And I don't have anything in my bottle. I need to go and bring some water, but I'll do that after finishing this live streaming. Sarah's social deprivation caused deep psychological pain. Without interaction, a brain suffers. A solitary confinement is illegal in many jurisdictions. Let me check its pronunciation. I don't have any pronunciation here. Jurisdictions. I'll check this, translate, share, import, upload, add note. There is nothing here. Okay, jurisdiction. Precisely because observers have long recognized the damage caused by stripping away one of the most vital aspects of human life. Interaction with the others, starved of contact with the world, Sarah rapidly entered a hallucinatory state. The sun would come in at a certain time of day at an angle through my window, and all of the little dust particles in my cell were illuminated by the sun. I saw all those particles of dust as other human beings occupying the planet, and they were in the stream of life. They were interacting, they were bouncing off one another. They were doing something collective. I saw myself as off in a corner, walled up, out of the stream of life. In September 2010, after more than a year in captivity, Sarah was released and allowed to rejoin the world. The trauma of the event stayed with her. She suffered from depression and was easily led to panic. The next year, she married Shane Bauer, one of the other hikers. She reports that she and Shane are able to calm one another. But it's not always easy. They both carry emotional scars. The philosopher Martin Heidegger suggested that it is difficult to speak of a person being. Instead, we are typically being in the world. This was his way of emphasizing that the world around you is a large part of who you are. The self doesn't exist in a vacuum. Although scientists and clinicians can observe what happens to people in solitary confinement, it is difficult to study so directly. However, an experiment by neuroscientists scientist Naomi Eisenberger can give insight into what happens in the brain in a slightly tamer condition when we are excluded from a group. Imagine throwing a ball around with a couple of other people, and at some point you get cut out of the game. The other two throw back and forth between themselves, excluding you. Eisenberger's experiment is based on that simple scenario. She had play play a simple computer game in which their animated character threw a ball around with two other players. The volunteers were led to believe that the other players were controlled by two other humans, but in fact they were just part of the computer program. At first, the others played nicely, but after a while, they cut the volunteer out of the game and simply threw between each other. Eisenberger had the volunteers play this game while they were lying down in a brain scanner. The technique is called functional magnetic resonance imagine or fMRI. She found something remarkable. Now, when the volunteers were left out of the game, areas involved in their pain matrix became active. Not getting the ball might seem insignificant, but to the brain, social rejection is so meaningful that it hurts literally. Now, why does the reaction hurts? Now, presumably, this is a clue that social bonding has evolutionary importance. In other words, the pain is a mechanism that steers us toward interaction and acceptance by others. Our inbuilt neural machinery drives us toward bonding with others. It urges us to form groups. This sheds a light on the social world that surrounds us everywhere. Humans constantly form groups. We bind together through links of family, friendship, work, style, sports teams, religion, culture, skin pigment, language, hobbies, and political affiliation. It gives us comfort to belong to a group, and that fact gives us a critical hint about our species' history. Beyond survival of the fittest, now, when we think about human evolution, we are all familiar with the concept of survival of the fittest. It calls to mind the picture of a strong and wily individual who can outrun, or outmate other member of its species. In other words, one has to be a good competitor to thrive and survive. The model has good explanatory power, but it leaves some aspects of our behavior difficult to explain. Consider altruism. Why does survival of the fittest explain why people help each other out? Selection of the strongest individual doesn't seem to cover it. So theorists introduced the additional idea of kin selection. This means that I care not only about myself but also others with whom I share genetic material. For example, brothers and cousins. As the evolutionary biologist J.S. Haldane equipped, I would gladly jump in a river to save two of my brothers or eight of my cousins. However, even kin selection is not enough to explain all the facets of human behavior, because people get together and cooperate irrespective of kinship. That observation leads to the idea of group selections. Here is the concept. If a group is composed entirely of people who cooperate, everyone in the group will be better off for it. On average, you will fare better than other people who aren't very cooperative with their neighbors. Together, the member of a group can help each other to survive. They are safer, more productive, and better able to overcome challenges. This drive to bond with others is called Euso, eu, eusociality. U is a Greek for good, and it provides a glue, irrespective of kinship, and that allows the building of tribes, groups, and nations. It's not that individual selection doesn't occur. It's just that it doesn't provide the complete picture. Although humans are competitive and individualistic much of the time, it's also the case in the case that we spend quite a bit of our lives cooperating for the good of the group. This has allowed human population to thrive across the planet and to build societies and civilizations. Feats that individuals, no matter how fit, could never pull off in isolation. Real progress is only possible with alliances that become confederation and our sociality is one of the major factors in the richness and complexity of our own modern world. So our drive to come together into groups is a survival advantage, but it has a dark side as well. For every in group, there must exist at least one out group. Outgroups and understanding of in-groups and outgroups is critical to understand our history. Repeatedly, across the globe, groups of the people, all people inflict violence on other groups, even those that are defenseless and oppose no direct threat. The year 1915 saw the symmetric killing of over a million Armenians by the Ottoman Turks in the Nankin massacre of 1937. The Japanese invaded China and killed hundreds of thousands of unarmed civilians. In 1994, in a period of 100 days, the Hutus in Rwanda killed 800,000 Tutsis, largely with matches. I don't view these with the detached eye of an historian. If you were to look at my family tree, you would see that most of the branches come to an abrupt end in the early 1940s. They were murdered because they were Jewish, caught in the jaws of the Nazi genocide as a scapegoated outgroup. After the Holocaust, Europe got in the habit of vowing never again. But 50 years later, genocide happened again, this time just 600 miles away in Yugoslavia between 1992 and 1995. During the Yugoslav war, over 100,000 Muslims were slaughtered by Serbians in violent act that became known as ethnic cleansing. One of the worst events of the war happened in Srebrenica. Here, over the course of the 10 days, 8,000 Bosnian Muslims, known as Bosniaks, were shot and killed. They had taken refuge inside a United Nations compound after Srebrenica was surrounded by siege forces. But on July 11, 1995, the United Nations commanders expelled all the refugees from the compound, delivering them into the hands of their enemies waiting just outside the gates. Women were raped, men were executed, and even children were killed. Dutch forces watch over the United Nations compound in which thousands of Bosnian Muslims sought refuge. Hassan Nohanovic lost his family in the massacre that ensued when the Dutch commanders expelled the refugees into the hands of siege force. I flew to Sarajevo to better understand what had happened, and there I had the chance to speak with a tall, middle-aged man named Hassan Nohanovic. Hassan, a Bosnian Muslim, had been working at the compound as a UN translator. His family was also there among the refugees, but they had been sent out of the compound to die, while only he had been allowed to stay because of his value as translator. His mother, father, and brother were killed that day. The part that haunts him the most is this: the continuation of the killings of torture was per- perpetrated by our neighbors, the very people we had been living with for decades. They were capable of killing their own social school friends. To exemplify the ways in which normal social interaction broke down. He told me how Serbs arrested a Bosniak dentist. They hung him by his arms from a light pole and they beat him with a metal bar until they broke his spine. Hassan told me how the dentist hung there for 3 days while Serbian children walked past his body on their way to school. As he put it, there are universal values. These values are very basic. Don't kill. In April 1992, this don't kill certainly disappeared and it became go and kill. Syndrome E. What allows What allows or diminished emotional reaction to harming another person? The neurosurgeon, it's Zach Fried, points out that when you look across violent events all over the world, you find the same character of behavior everywhere. It's as though people shift from their normal brain function to act in a specific way. In the same way, a physician can look for coughing and fever with pneumonia. He suggested that one can look for and identify particular behaviors that characterize perpetrators in violent situations, and he named this syndrome E. In Freud's framework, syndrome E is characterized by a diminished emotional reactivity, which allows repetitive acts of violence. It also includes hyperarousal, or as the German call it, Rausch, a feeling of elation in doing these acts. There is a group contagion. Everybody is doing it, and it catches on and spreads. There is compartmentalization, in which somebody can care about his own family and yet perform violence on someone else's family. From a neuroscientific point of view, the important clue is that other brain functions, such as language and memory and problem solving, are intact. That suggests it's not a brainward change, but instead only involves areas involved in emotion and in empathy. It's as though they become in effect short circuited. They no longer participate in decision making. Instead, perpetrators' joys are now fueled by parts of the brain that underpin logic and memory and reasoning and so on, but not the networks that involve emotional consideration of what it is like to be someone else. In Freud's view, this equates to moral disengagement. People are no longer using the emotional systems that, under normal circumstances, steer their social decision making. In this photograph from the Holocaust, a soldier takes aim at a woman holding her child. Hassan's family is buried at this graveyard in Serbia as Srebrenica. Each year, more bodies are discovered, identified, and brought here. What allows such an alarming shift in human interaction? How can it be compatible with a eusocial species? Why does genocide continue to happen all around our planet? Traditionally, we examine warfare and killings in the context of history and economics and politics. However, for a complete picture, I believe we need also to understand this as a neural phenomenon. It would normally feel unconscionable to murder your neighbor. So, what suddenly allows hundreds of or thousands of people to do exactly what? What is it about certain situations that short circuit the normal social functioning of the brain? Some more equal than others. Can a breakdown of normal social functioning be studied in the laboratory? I designed an experiment to find out. Our first question was a simple one. Does your basic sense of empathy towards someone change depending on whether they are in your in group or out group? We put participant in the scanner. They saw six hands on the screen, like a spinning wheel in a game show. The computer randomly picks one of the hands. That hand then expands into the middle of the screen, and you watch it get touched with a cotton swab or stabbed with a syringe needle. These are two actions that yield about the same activity in the visual system, but a very different reaction in the rest of the brain. During the brain scanning, we showed participants videos of hands being stabbed in a needle or touched with a cotton swab. As we saw earlier, watching someone else in a pain activates one's own pain matrix. That's the basic of empathy. So now we were able to push our questions about empathy to the next level. Once we had established this baseline condition, we made a very simple change. The same six hands appeared on the screen, but now each had a one word label reading Christians, Jewish, atheist, Muslim, Hindu, or Scientologist. When a hand was randomly selected, it expanded to the middle of the screen and was then touched with the cotton swab or stabbed with the syringe needle. Our experimental question was this: would your brain care as much when seeing a member of an outgroup getting hurt? We found a good deal of individual variability, but on average, people's brains showed a larger empathic response when they saw someone in their group in pain, and a less of a response when it was member of one of their outgroups. And the results is especially remarkable given that these were simply one word labels. It takes very little to establish group membership. A basic categorization is enough to change your brain's preconscious response to another person in pain. Now, one might have opinion about the divisiveness of the religion, but there is a deeper point to note here. In our study, even atheists showed a larger response to pain in the hand label atheist and a less of an empathic response to other levels. So the result is not fundamentally about religion, it's about which team you are on. Now we see that people can feel a lower empathy for a member of an outgroup, but not understand. But to understand something like violence or genocides, we still need to drill down one step further to dehumanization. When these participants saw pain in a member of his in-group, there was a large neural response in the anterior cingulate cortex. When he watched a member of an outgroup in a pain, there was a little activity. Baseline pain, in-group empathic response, individual subject, fMRI signals. Lasana Harris of the University of Leiden in Holland has conducted a series of experiments that move us closer to understand how that happens. Harris is looking for change in the brain's social network, in particular the medial prefrontal cortex. This region becomes active when we are interacting with or thinking about other people, but it's not active when we are dealing with in inanimate objects like a coffee mug. Harris shows volunteers photographs of people from different social groups, for example, homeless people or drug addicts, and he finds that the M prefrontal cortex, medial prefrontal cortex, is less active when they look at a homeless person. It's as though the person is more like an object. The medial prefrontal cortex is involved in thinking about other people, at least most other people. As he puts it, by shutting down the systems that see the homeless person as follow human. No one doesn't have to experience the pleasant pressure of feeling bad about not giving money. In other words, the homeless have become dehumanized. Now the brain is viewing them more like object and less like people. Not surprisingly, no one is less likely to treat them with consideration. As Harris explains, if you don't properly diagnose people as human beings, then the moral rules that are reserved for human people may not apply. Dehumanization is a key component of genocides. Just as the Nazis viewed Jews as something less than human, the Serbs in former Yugoslavia viewed the Muslims this way. When I was in Sarajevo, I walked along the main street. During the war, it became known as Snipers Alley because civilian men, women, and children were killed by riflemen crouched in the surrounding hillside and neighboring buildings. This street became one of the most powerful symbols of the horror of the war. How does a normal city street come to that? This war, like all other, was fueled by an effective form of neural manipulation. Now, once that's been practiced for centuries. Propaganda during the Yugoslav war, the main news network, radio television of Serbia, was controlled by the Serb government and consistently presented distorted news stories as factual. The network made up reports of ethically motivated attacks by Bosnian Muslims and Croats against the Serb people. They continually demonized Bosnian and Croatians and used negative language in their descriptions of Muslims. At the height of bizarreness, the network broadcast an unfounded story that Muslims were feeding Serbian children to the hungry lions of the Sarajevo Zoo. Genocide is only possible when dehumanization happens on a massive scale, and the perfect tool for the job is propaganda. It keys right into the neural networks that understand other people and dials down the degree to which we empathize with them. We have seen that our brains can be manipulated by political agendas to dehumanize other people, which can then lead to the darkest side of human acts. But it is possible to program our brain to prevent this. One possible solution lies in 1960s experiment that was conducted not in a science lab but in a school. It was 1968, the day after assassination of civil rights leader Martin Luther King. Jane Elliott, a teacher in a small town in Iowa, decided to demonstrate to her class what prejudice was about. Jen asked her class whether they knew how it would feel to be judged by the color of their skin, and the student mostly thought they could. But she wasn't so sure. So she launched what was destined to become a famous experiment. She announced that the blue-eyed people were the better people in this room. Jane Elliott. The brown-eyed people do not get to use the drinking fountain. You'll have to use the paper cups. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground because you are not as good as blue-eyed people. The brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are. Now on this page is everyone ready? Everyone but Laurie. Ready, Laurie. Child, she is a brown eye. She has a brown eye. Then she is a brown eye. Now you'll begin to notice today that we spend a great deal of time waiting for brown-eyed people. A moment later, Jane looks around for her yardsticks, and two boys pipe up. Rex points out to her where the yardstick is, and Raymond helpfully offers, "Hey, Mr. Elliot, you better keep that on your desk. So if the brown-eyed people get out of hand." I recently sat down with those two boys. Now grown men, Rex Kozak and Ray Hassan. They both have blue eyes. I asked them if they remembered what their behavior was like on that day. Ray reported that I was tremendously evil to my friends. I was going out of my way to pick on my brown-eyed friend for the sake of my own promotion. He recalled that at the time his hair was quite blonde and his eyes were quite blue, and I was the perfect little Nazi. I looked for ways to be mean to my friends who minutes or hours earlier had been very close to me. The next day, Jane reversed the experiment. She announced to the class, "The brown-eyed people may take off their collars, and each of you may put your collar on a blue-eyed person. The brown-eyed people get 5 extra minutes of recess. You blue-eyed people are not allowed to be on the playground equipment at any time. You blue-eyed people are not to play with the brown-eyed people. Brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people." Eyed people. Rex described what the reversal was like. It takes your world and shatter it like you have never had your world shattered before. When Ray was in the down group, he felt such a deep sense of loss of personality and a self and of self that he felt it was almost impossible to function. Now, one of the most important things we learn as human is perspective taking, and children don't typically get a meaningful exercise in that. Now, when one is forced to stand what it's like to stand in someone else's shoe, it opens up new cognitive pathways. After the exercise in Mr. Elliot's classroom, Rex was more vigilant against racist statements. He remembered telling his father, "That's not appropriate." Rex remembered that a moment fondly. He felt affirmed by it, and he knew he'd begun to change as a person. The brilliance of the brown eyes, was that Jane Elliot switched which group was on top. That allowed the children to extract a larger lesson. Systems of rules can be arbitrary. The children learned that the truths of the world aren't fixed, and moreover, they are not necessarily truths. This exercise empowered the children to see through the smoke and the mirrors of political agendas. Exercise. Where I was going, I forgot. Sometimes it happens with me that while reading, if I miss the sentence or if I miss the line that I'm reading on, and if I like see somewhere else or thought of something else, then like I'm not able to like recognize where I was reading. Let me read it from here itself. Now, one of the most important things we learn as a human is perspective seeking. And children don't typically get a meaningful exercise in that. When one is forced to understand what it's like to understand in someone else's shoe, it opens up new cognitive pathways. After the exercise in Mr. Elliot's classroom, Rex was more vigilant against racist statement. He remembered telling his father, "That's not appropriate." Rex remembers that moment fondly. He felt affirmed. The brilliance of the blue eyes or brown eyes exercise was that Jane Elliot switched which group was on top. That allowed the children to extract a larger lesson. A system of rules can be arbitrary. The children learned that the truths of the world aren't fixed. and moreover, they are not necessarily truths. This exercise empowered the children to see through the smoke and mirrors of political agendas and to form their own opinions. Surely a skill we would want for all our children. Education plays a key role in preventing genocide only by understanding the neural drive to form in groups and outgroups. And the standard tricks by which propaganda plugs into this drive. Can we hope to interrupt the paths of dehumanization that end in mass atrocity? In this age of digital hyperlinking, it's more important than now of ever to understand the links between humans. Human brains are fundamentally wired to interact. We are a splendidly social species. Although our social drives can sometimes be manipulated, they also sit squarely at the center of the human success story. You might assume that you end at the border of your skin, but there is a sense in which there is no way to mark the end of you and the beginning of all those around you. Your neurons and those of everyone on the planet interplay in a giant shifting superorganism. What we demarcate as you is simply a network in a larger network. If we want a bright future for our species, we will want to continue to research how human brain interact, the danger as well as the opportunities, because there is no avoiding the truth etched into the wiring of our own brains. We need each other. Who will we be? Who will we be? The human body is a masterpiece of complexity and beauty, a symphony of 40 trillion cells working in concert. However, it has its limitation. Your sense set boundaries on what you can experience. Your body sets limit on what you can do. But what if the brain could understand new kinds of input and control new kinds of limbs, expanding the reality we inhabit? We are at a moment in human history when the marriage of our biology and our technology will transcend the brain's limitation. Now we can hack our own hardware to steer a course into the future. This is poised to fundamentally change what it will mean to be a human. Over the last 100,000 years, our species has been on quite a journey. We have gone from living as primitive hunter gatherers, surviving on scraps, to a planet conquering a hyper-connected species that defines its own destiny. Today we enjoy mundane experience that our ancestors could never have dreamed of. We have clean rivers that we can call into our well-adorned caves when we desire. We hold small rock-sized device that contains the knowledge of the world. We regularly see the tops of the clouds and the curvature of our home planet from space. We send messages to the other side of the globe in 80 milliseconds and upload files to floating space colony of humans at 60 megabits per second. Even when simply driving to work, we routinely move at speeds that outstrip biology's great pieces, such as cheetahs. Our species owes its runway success to the special properties of the 3 pounds of matter stored inside our skull. Now, what is it about the human brain that has made this journey possible? If we can understand the secrets behind our achievements, then perhaps we can direct the brain's strength in careful, purposeful ways, opening a new chapter in the human story. What do the next thousands years have in store for us? In the far future, what will the human race be like? A flexible computational device, the secret to understanding our success and our future opportunity. in the brain's tremendous ability to adjust, known as brain plasticity. As we saw in chapter 2, this feature has allowed us to drop into the environment and pick up on the local details we need to survive, including the local language, local environmental pressures, or local cultural requirements. Brain plasticity is also the key to our future, because it opens up the door to making modification to our own hardware. Now let's begin by understanding just how flexible a computational device the brain is. Consider the case of a young girl named Cameron Mott. At the age of 4, she began to have violent seizures. The seizures were aggressive. Cameron would suddenly drop to the floor, requiring her to wear a helmet all the time. She was quickly diagnosed with a rare and debilitating disease called Rasmussen's encephalitis. Her neurologist knew that this form of epilepsy would lead to paralysis and eventually to death, and so they proposed a drastic surgery in 2007. In an operation that took almost 12 hours, a team of neurosurgeons removed the entire half of Cameron's brain. What would be the long-term effect of removing half her brain? As it turns out, the consequences were surprisingly slight. Cameron is weak on one side of her body, but otherwise she is essentially indistinguishable from the other children in her class. She has no problem understanding language, music, math, stories. She is good in school, and she participates in sports. Now, how could this be possible? It's not that one half of Cameron's brain was simply not needed. Instead, the remaining half of Cameron's brain dynamically rewired to take over the missing functions, essentially cramming all the operation into half the brain space. Cameron's recovery underscores a remarkable ability of the brain. It rewires itself to adjust the inputs, outputs, and tasks at hand. In this critical way, the brain is fundamentally unlike the hardware in our digital computers. Instead, it's liveware. It reconfigures its own circuitry. Although the adult's brain isn't quite as flexible as the child's, it still retains an astonishing ability to adapt and change. As we saw in previous chapters, every time we learn something new, whether it's the map of London or the ability to stack cups, the brain changes itself. It's this property of the brain, its plasticity, that enables a new marriage between our technology and our biology. My throat is getting very dried up. I don't want to go to bring God because I want to finish 2 hours of live streaming. Then only I'll be like going just by turning off my ending my live stream. Plugging in peripheral devices. We have become progressively better at plugging machinery directly into our bodies. You may not realize it, but currently hundreds of thousands of people are walking around with artificial hearing and artificial vision, with a device called cochlear implant, an external microphone digitize a sound signal and feeds it to the auditory nerve. Similarly, the retinal implant digitizes as a signal from a camera and sends it through an electrode grid plugged into the optic nerve at the back of the eye. For deaf and blind people around the planet, these devices has restored their senses. It wasn't always clear that such an approach would work. Then, when these technologies were first introduced, many researchers were skeptical. The brain is wired up with such precision and specificity that it wasn't clear there could be a meaningful dialogue between metal electrodes and biological cells. Now, would the brain be able to understand the crude non-biological signals, or would it be confused by them? As it turns out, the brain learns to interpret the signals. Getting used to these implants is a bit like learning a new language for the brain. At first, the foreign electrical signals are unintelligible, but the neural networks eventually extract patterns in incoming data. Although the input
signals are crude. The brain finds a way to make sense of them. It hunts for patterns, cross-referencing with other senses. If there is structure to be found in incoming data, the brain ferrets it out, and after several weeks, the information begins to take on meaning. Even though the implants give slightly different signals than to our natural sense organs, the brain figures out how to make do with the information it can get.
Artificial hearing and vision. A cochlear implant bypasses problems in the biology of the ear and fits its audio signals directly to the undamaged auditory nerve. The brain's data cable for sending electrical impulses onto the auditory cortex for decoding. The implant picks up sound from the outside world and passes them to the auditory nerve by means of 16 tiny electrodes. The experience of hearing doesn't arrive immediately. People have to learn to interpret the foreign dialects of the signal fed to the brain. As one cochlear implant recipient, Michael Korost, describes his experience, when the device was um, turned on a month after surgery, the first sentence I heard sounded like zzz, zzz, zzz. My brain gradually learned how to interpret the alien signals. Before long, became what did you have for breakfast? After months of practice, I could use the electrophone again, even converse it in loud bars and cafeterias. Retinal implants work on similar principles. Now, the tiny electrodes of the retinal implant bypasses the normal functions of the photoreceptors sheet, sending out their tiny sparks of electrical activity. These implants are used mostly for eyes disease, in which the photoreceptors at the back of the eye are degenerating, but in which the cells of the optic nerve remain healthy, even though the signals sent by the plant are not precisely what the visual system is used to. The downstream processes are able to learn to extract the information they need for vision. My throat is getting very dry. Plug and play, an extra sensory feature. The brain's plasticity allows new inputs to be interpreted. Now, what sensory opportunities does that open up? We come into the world with standard sets of basic senses: hearing, touch, sight, smell, and taste, along with other senses such as balance, vibration, and temperature. The sensors we have are the portals by which we pick up signals from our environment. However, as we saw in the first chapter, these senses only allow us to experience a tiny fraction of the world around us. All the information sources for which we don't have sensor are invisible to us. I think of our sensory portals as peripheral plug and play device. The key is that the brain doesn't know and doesn't care where it gets the data. However, information comes in, the out brain figures out what to do with it. In this framework, I think of the brain as a general purpose computing device. It operates on whatever it's fed. The idea is that Mother Nature only needed to invent the principle of brain operation once, and then she was freed up to tinker with designing new input channel. The end result is that all these sensors we know and love are merely devices that can be swapped in and out. Stick them in and the brain can get to work. In this framework, evolution doesn't need to continually redesign the brain. Just the peripheral and the brain figures out how to utilize them. Just look across the animal kingdom and you'll find a mid-boggling variety of peripheral sensors in use by animal brains. The snake have heat sensors. The glass
A knife fish has sensors for interpreting changes in the local electrical field. Cows and birds have magnetite, with which they can orient themselves to the Earth's magnetic field. Animals can see in the ultraviolet. Elephants can hear at very long distance. While dogs experience a richly scented reality. The crucible of natural selection is the ultimate hacker space, and these are just some of the ways that genes have figured out how to channel data from the outside world into the internal world. The end result is that evolution has built a brain that can experience many different slices of reality. The consequence I want to highlight is that there may be nothing special or fundamental about the sensors we are used to. They are just what we have inherited from a complex history of evolutionary constraints. We are not stuck with them. Our main proof of principle for this idea comes from a concept called sensory substitution, which refer to feeding sensory information through unusual sensory channel, such as vision through touch. The brain figures out what to do with the information because it doesn't care how the data finds its way in. Sensory substitutions might sound like science fiction, but in fact it's already well established. The first demonstration was published in the journal Nature in 1969. In that report, neuroscientist Paul Baccherita demonstrated that a blind subjects could learn to see objects even when the visual information was fed to them in an unusual way. Blind people were seated in a modified dental chair, and the video feed from a camera was converted into a pattern of small plungers pressed against their lower back. In other words, if you put a circle in front of the camera, the participant would feel a circle on her back. Put a face in front of the camera and the participant feels the face on her back. Amazingly, blind people could come to interpret the objects and could also experience the increasing size of approaching objects. They could, at least in a sense, come to see through their backs. This was the first example of sensory substitution of many to follow. Modern incarnation of this approach include turning a video feed into a sound stream or a series of small shocks on the forehead or the tongue. Four methods to push visual information to the brain through unusual sensory channel: the lower back, the ears, the forehead, and the tongue. An example of the latter is postage stamp sized device called the brain port shocks to the tongue via a small grid that sits on the tongue. A blind subject wear sunglasses with a small camera attached. Camera pixels are converted into electrical pulses on the tongue, which feels something like the fizz of a carbonated drink. Now, blind people can become quite good at using the brain port, navigating obstacle courses, or throwing a ball into a basket. Now, one blind athlete, Eric Weinmeier, uses the brain port to rock climb, assessing the position of crags and crevices from the pattern of his tongue. If it sounds crazy to see through your tongue, just keep in mind that seeing is never anything but electrical signals streaming into the darkness of your skull. Normally, this happens via the optic nerves, but there is no reason the information can't stream in via other nerves instead. Now, sensory substitution demonstrates the brain takes whatever data comes in and figures out what it can make of it. Now, one of the projects in my laboratory is to build a platform for enabling sensory substitution. Specifically, we have built a wearable technology called the variable extrasensory transducer, or WEST, known inconspicuously under the clothing. The vest is covered with tiny vibratory motors. These motors convert data streams into dynamic patterns of vibration across the torso. We are using the vest to give hearing to the deaf. After about 5 days of using the vest, a person who was born deaf can correctly identify spoken words. Although the experiments are still in their early stages, we expect that after several months of wearing the vest, users will come to have a direct perceptual experience, essentially the equivalent of hearing. It may seem strange that a person can come to hear via moving patterns of vibration onto the torso. But just as with the dental chair or the tongue grid, the trick is this: the brain doesn't care how it gets the information as long as it gets it. Sensory augmentation. Sensory substitution is great for circumventing broken sensory systems. But beyond substitutions, what if we could use this technology to extend our sensory inventory to this end? My students and I are currently adding new senses to the human repertoire to augment our experience of the world. Consider this: the internet is streaming petabytes of interesting data. But currently, we can only access that information by staring at a phone or computer screen. What if you could have real-time data streamed into your body so that it became part of your direct experience of the world? In other words, what if you could field data? This could be weather data, stock exchange data, Twitter data, cockpit data from an airplane, or data about the state of a factory, all encoded as a new vibratory language that the brain learns to understand. As you went about your daily tasks, you could have a direct perception of whether it's raining 100 miles away or whether it's going to snow tomorrow. Or you could develop intuitions about where the stock market were going, subconsciously identifying the movements of the global economy. Or you could sense what is trending across the Twitter sphere. And in this way, we tapped into the consciousness of the species. To provide To provide sensory substitution for the deaf, my graduate student Scott Novick and I built the West. This variable tech captures sounds from the environment and maps it to smell vibrational motors all over the torso. The motors activate in patterns according to the frequencies of the sound. In this way, sound becomes moving pattern of vibrations. At first, these vibratory signals makes no sense, but with enough practice, the brain works out what to do with the data. Deep people become able to translate the complicated patterns on the torso into an understanding of what is being said. The brain figures out how to consciously unlock the patterns, similar to the manner in which blind person comes to effortlessly read braille. The West has the potential to be game changer for the deaf community. Unlike a cochlear implant, it doesn't require an invasive surgery, and it's at least 20 times cheaper, which makes it a solution that can be global. The bigger vision for the West is this: beyond sound, it can also serve as a platform for any kind of streaming information to find its way to the brain. See videos of the West in action at eagleman.com. Although this sounds like science fiction, we are not far off from this future. All thanks to the brain's talent at extracting patterns, even when we are not trying. That is the trick that can allow us to observe complex data and incorporate it into our sensory experience of the world. Like reading this page, observing new data streams will come to feel effortless. Unlike reading, however, sensory addition would be a way to take on new information about the world without having to consciously attend to it. At the moment, we don't know the limits, or if there are limits to the kinds of data the brain can incorporate. But it's clear that we are no longer natural species that has to wait for sensory adaptations on an evolutionary time scale. As we move into the future, we will increasingly design our own sensory portals on the world. We will wire ourselves into expanded sensory reality.
How to get a better body. Now, how we sense the world is only half the story, and the other half is how we interact with it. In the same way that we are beginning to modify our sensory cells, can the brain's flexibility be leveraged to modify the way we reach out and touch the world? Meet Jan Schuerman. I'm not able to pronounce it accurately.
How to get a better body. How we sense the world is only half the story. The other half is how we interact with it. In the same way that we are.
It just started reading it. Speech, rewrite, appropriate writing, share. Let me check what is it. Share. I want to check its pronunciation, but look up, translate. Schuerman.
Schuerman.
Okay, now I got it. Schuerman. Schuerman.
Schuerman. Schuerman.
Schuerman.
Schuerman.
Schuerman.
Schuerman.
Schuerman. Meet Jan Schuerman. Now, because of the rare genetic disease called spinocerebellar. Actually, I was not able to find how to pronounce or how to get its pronunciation, but I found it like I have to go to the translate. Spinocular, spinocerebellar. I'll check in Hindi.
Spinocerebellar.
Spinocerebellar.
Spinocerebellar. Spinocerebellar. Spinocerebellar.
Spinocerebellar.
Spinocerebellar.
Spinocerebellar. Okay. Disorder. The spinal cord nerves connecting her brain to her muscle can did. Let's take this as well. I'm very like some of the things very makes me very interesting.
Deteriorated.
Deteriorated. Now I got to know how to pronounce. Let's see if I now want to pronounce pronounce this, then I have to go to here, then choose language. I'll choose English US because I want to read in English. Yes, US, and I just need to play it.
Spinocerebellar.
Spinocerebellar. Bellar.
Spinocerebellar.
Spinocerebellar. And let's take these as well. We have Hindi. Let's choose English. UK.
Schuerman.
Schuerman. The same way it was. I'm not able to find English. Yes. Ah, I found it, but it's not showing it.
Schuerman.
Schuerman. Meet Jan Schuerman. Because of a rare genetic disease called spinocerebellar. Let's check it again. Choose language. I'll choose US and we'll pronounce it.
Spinocerebellar.
Spinocerebellar. Spinocerebellar. Okay. Meet Jan Schuerman. Because of a rare genetic disease called spinocerebellar disorder, the spinal cord nerves connecting her brain to her muscles have deteriorated.
Deteriorated.
Deteriorated. She can feel her body, but she can't move it. As she describes it,
My brain is saying lift up to my arm, but the arm is saying I can't hear you. Her total paralysis made her an ideal candidate for a new study at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Researchers there have implanted two electrodes into her left motor cortex, the last stop for brain signals before they plunge down the spinal cord to control the muscles of the arm. The electrical storms in her cortex are monitored, translated on a computer to understand the intention, and the output is used to control the world's most advanced robotic arm. The electrical signals in Jan's Sherman brain are decoded, and the bionic,
Bionic.
bionic, and bionic arm follows the commands via her thoughts. The arm can accurately reach. The fingers can smoothly curl and uncurl, and the wrist can roll and flex. When Jan wants to move the robotic arm, the simply thinks about moving it. As she moves the arm, Jan tends to talk to it in the third person. Go up, go down, 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 go right, and grasp, release, and the arm does so on cue, although she speaks the commands out loud. She has no need to. There is a direct physical link between her brain and the arm. Jan reports that her brain has not forgotten how to move an arm, even though it hadn't moved one in 10 years. It's like riding a bicycle. Bicycle, she says. Jan's proficiency points to a future in which we use technology to enhance and extend our bodies, not only replacing limbs or organs, but improving them, elevating them from human fragility to something more durable. Her robotic arm is just the first hint of an upcoming bionic era in which will be able to control much stronger and longer lasting equipment than the skin and muscle and brittle bones now we are born with, among other things. That opens up a new possibilities for space travels, something for which our delicate bodies are ill-equipped. Beyond replacement limbs, advancing brain machine interface technology suggests now more exotic possibilities. Imagine extending your body to be something unrecognizable. Start with this idea. Now, what if you could use your brain signals to wirelessly control a machine across the room, in which an answering email, while simultaneously using your motor cortex to control a thought-controlled vacuum cleaner? At first glance, the concept may sound unworkable, but keep in mind that brains are great at running tasks in the background, not requiring much in the way of conscious bandwidth. Just consider how easily you can drive a car while simultaneously talking to a passenger and fiddling with the radio knob. Let's take fiddling.
Fiddling.
Fiddling. I can search as well. With the radio knob. With the proper brain machine interface and wireless technology, there is no reason you couldn't control large devices such as a crane or a forklift wirelessly at a distance with your thoughts, in the same way that you might absent mindedly. I'll check this out. Absent mindedly. ध्यान से.
Mindedly.
Mindedly. Dig with a trowel or playing a guitar. Now, your capacity to do this well would be enhanced. enhanced by sensory feedback, which could be done visually. You watch how the machine moves, or even by feeding data back into your somatosensory cortex. US.
Somatosensory.
Somatosensory. Or even by feeding data back into your somatosensory cortex, you feel how the machine moves. Controlling such limbs or take practice and be awkward at first, in the same way that a baby has to fail. Baby has to fail for some months to learn how to finally control its arm and legs. With time, these machines would effectively become an extra limb, one that could have extraordinary strength, hydraulic hydraulic or otherwise. They would come to feel the way that your arms or legs do to you know now. They would just be another limb, simple extension of ourselves. Now we don't know of a theoretical limit on the kinds of signals brain could learn to incorporate. It may be possible to have almost any sort of physical body and any kind of interaction with the world that we want. There is no reason an extension of you couldn't be taken care of tasks on the other side of the planet, or meaning rocks on the moon while you're enjoying a sandwich here on Earth. The body we arrive with is really just the starting point for humanity in the distant future. Now, we won't just be extending our physical bodies, but fundamentally our sense of self, as we take on new sensory experiences and control new kinds of bodies that will change us profoundly as individuals. Our physicality sets the stage for how we will feel, how we think, and who we are without the limitation of the standard issue senses and the standard issues body. Now will become different people. Now our grandchildren may struggle to understand who we were and what was important to us. At this moment in history, we may have more in common with our Stone Age ancestors than with our near future descendants. Stan in live. Stan. Stain.
Staying.
Stain.
Staying.
Stain. Stain.
Staying.
Stain. Stain. Staying alive. Now we are already beginning to extend the human body, but no matter how much we enhance ourselves, there is one snag that's difficult to avoid. Our brains and bodies are built of physical stuff. Now they will deteriorate. I'm not able to pronounce it correctly, but I'll try to pronounce it again and again so that I'll be able to pronounce. I'll say it in US so that I want to learn, like, be good enough.
Deteriorate.
Deteriorate and time. There will come a moment when all your neural activity will come to a halt, and then the glorious experience of being conscious will come to an end. It doesn't matter who you know, what you do. This is the fate of all of us. In fact, it's the fate of all life. But only humans are so unusually foresighted that we suffer over this knowledge. Not everyone is content to suffer. Some have chosen to fight death's spectre. Scattered confederacies.
Confederacies.
Confederacies. Confederacies of researchers are interested in the idea that a better understanding of our biology can address our mortality. Now, what if in the future we didn't have to die? Now, when my friend and mentor Francis Crick was cremated. I spent some time thinking about what a scheme it was that all his neural matter was going up in flames. That brain contained all the knowledge, wisdom, and intellect of one of the heavyweight champions of 20th century biology. All the archives of his life, his memories, his capacity to insight, his sense of humor never stored in the physical structure of his brain, and simply because his heart had stopped, everyone was content to throw away the hard drive. It made me wonder, could the information in his brain be preserved somehow? If the brain were preserved and could a person's thoughts and awareness and a personhood ever be brought back to life? Now, for the past 50 years, the Alcor Life Extensions Foundation has been developing technology they believe will allow people living today to enjoy a second life cycle later. Now, the organization currently stores 129 people in a deep freeze that halts their biological decay. Here is how cryopreservation cryopreservation works.
Cryopreservation.
Cryopreservation. Cryopreservation works. Now, first, and interested party signs his life insurance policy over to the foundation. Then, upon the legal declaration of his death, Alcar is alerted. A local team sweeps in to manage the body. The team immediately transferred the body to an ice bath in a process known as cryoprotective perfusion. They circulate 16 different chemicals to protect the alcar operating room. Now, for the final stage of the procedure, the body is cooled by computer controlled fans circulating extremely low temperature nitrogen gas. Now, the goal is to cool all parts of the body below 124 degrees Celsius as rapidly as possible to avoid any ice formation. The process takes about 3 hours, at the end of which the body will have vertified
Vitrified.
vitrified
Vitrified.
vitrified vitrified that is reached a stable ice-free state, and the body is then further cooled to 196 degrees Celsius over the next 2 weeks. Legal versus biological death. A person is declared legally dead when either his brain is clinically dead or his body has experienced irreversible cessation of respiration and circulation. Now, for the brain to be declared dead, all activity must have ceased in the cortex involved in a higher function. After brain death, a virtual function can still be maintained for organ donation or a body donation, a fact critical for alcar. Biological death, on the other hand, happens in the absence of intervention and involves the death of cells throughout the body, in the organs and in the brain, and means that the organs are no longer suitable for donation. Without oxygen from circulating blood, the body's cells rapidly start to die. To preserve a body and a brain in its least degraded form, cell death must be stopped or at least decelerate.
Decelerated.
This just
Decelerated.
decelerated decelerated as quickly as possible. In addition, during cooling, the priority is to prevent ice crystals from forming, which can destroy the delicate structure of the cells. Not all clients choose to have their whole body frozen. A less expensive option is to simply preserve the head. The separation of the head from the body is performed on surgical table, where the blood and fluids are washed out, and as with the whole body, clients are replaced with liquids that fix the tissues into place. At the end of the procedure, the clients are lowered into ultra-cooled liquid in giant stainless steel cylinder called a device. Jaber.
Doers. Doers.
Givers. This is where they'll remain for a long time. No one on the planet today knows how to successfully unfreeze and reanimate these frozen residents. But that's not the point. The hope is that one day the technology will exist to carefully thaw and then revive the people in the age community civilization in the distant future. It is presumed will command the technology to cure the disease that ravaged these bodies and brought them to a halt. Each of these divers stores four bodies and up to five heads, all stored at 196 degrees Celsius. Alcor members understand that the technology may never exist to revive them. Each person dwelling in the Alcor Devas took a leap of faith, hoping and dreaming that someday the technology will materialize to throw them out, revive them, and give them a second chance at life. The venture is a gamble that the future will develop the necessary technology. I spoke to the member of the community, Vio awaits his eventual entry into the divorce when the time comes. And he allowed the whole conceptions was a wager, but he pointed out at least it gives him a better than zero chance of cheating death, better odds than the rest of us. Dr. Max Moore, who runs the facility, doesn't use the word immortality. Instead, he says Alcor is about giving people a second chance at life, with the potential to live thousands of years or longer. Until that time comes, Alcor is their final resting place. Digital immortality. Not everyone with a penchant for life extension has fondness for cryopreservation. Crab preservation. Others have moved along a different line of inquiry. What if there were other ways to access the information stored in a brain? Not by bringing a deceased person's back to life, but instead by finding a way to read out the data directly. After all, the submicroscopically, the detailed structure of your brain contains all your knowledge and memories. So why couldn't that book be decrypted? Let's take a look at what would be required to do that. Now, to begin, we need extraordinarily powerful computers to store the detailed data of an individual brain. Now, fortunately, our exponentially growing computational power hints at profound possibilities. Over the past 20 years, computing power has increased over 1,000 times. The processing power of computer chips has doubled approximately every 18 months, and this trend continues. The technologies of our modern era allow us to store unimaginable amounts of data and run gargantuan um,
Gargantuan. Gargantuan.
gargantuan simulation. 20 years ago, these supercomputers was equivalent to all the computers power on the planet. 20 years from now, this will be the modest force, the type you might shrink down and wear on your body. Given our computing potential, it seems like likely what will someday be able to scan a working copy of the human brain onto a computer substrate. There is nothing in the theory that precludes this possibility. However, the challenge needs to be realistically appreciated. The typical brain has about 86 billion neurons, each making about 10,000 connections. They connect in a very specific manner, unique to each person. Your experiences, your memories, all the stuff that makes you is represented by the unique pattern of the cordillean connections between your brain cells. Now, these patterns far too large to comprehend. Is summarized as you were connect them.
Kentomi. Kentomi. Kentomi.
Kentomi. Connectomy. Connectomy.
Kunikume.
Konikomi.
Kunikume. Kentomi.
Kentomy. Ken. Kentomy. Contani. Kentomy. Kentomy. In an ambitious endeavor, Dr. Sebastian, I can read as this. I'm just checking this if I'll be able to pronounce it or not. When I was reading in iPad at the time, I was not able to find its pronunciation for the word, which like the name or which is not like kind of verbs or pronunciation like adjective or something like that, but it's more like a name. Then I was not able to find the pronunciation of those in iPad, but when I'm reading here, then I'm able to find its pronunciation.
Sebastian.
Sebastian. Sebastian. Dr. Sebastian Swiang. I can see this as well.
Soon.
Soon. Sebastian Soon at Princeton. In Princeton, he is working with his team to excavate the fine details of uh, canatomy, cantomy. With a system this microscopic and complex, it's ordinately difficult to map out the network of connectivity. Sang uses serial electron microscopy, which involves making a series of very thin slices of brain tissues using extremely precise blade. At the moment, mouse brains are used, not human. Each slice is subdivided into tiny areas, and each of these needs scanned by an extraordinarily powerful electron microscope. The result of each scan is a picture known as an electron micrograph, and this represents a segment of brain magnified 100,000 times. At this resolution, it's possible to make out a fine feature of the brain. The pace of the technological change. In 1965, Gordon Murray
More.
Moore, Gordon Moore, co-founder of the computing giant Intel, made a prediction about the rate of progress in computing power. Moore's law forecast that as transistors become smaller and more precise, the number that could fit onto a computer chip would double every 2 years, exponentially increasing computing power over time. Now, Moore's prediction has held true through the intervening decades, and has become shorthand now for the exponentially accelerating pace of technological change. Now, Moore's law is used by the computing industry to guide long-term planning and set new goals for technological advancement, because the law predicts that technological progress will increase exponentially rather than linearly. Some predict that at today's rate there will be 20,000 a year worth of progress in the next 100 years. At this pace, we can expect to see radical advancement in the technology that we rely on. A slice of the contomy, contomy, this striking two-dimensional picture are the first step toward working out the most complex circuit diagram in our known world. The small black dots are the DNA inside an individual cell. The perfect circles that you see are tiny spherical vessels of neurotransmitters.
Once these slices are stored in the computer, the more difficult work begins. One very thin slice at a time. The borders of the cells are traced out traditionally by hand, but increasingly by computer algorithms. Then the images are stacked atop one another. Hand an attempt is made to connect the full extent of individual cells across slices to reveal them in their three-dimensional richness. In this painstaking manner, a model emerges, revealing what is connected to what. This tiny chunk of brain tissue from a mouse contains about 300 connection synapses. A chunk this size represents 2000 a full mouse brain and about one of a human brain, and the dense spaghetti of connection is just a few billions of the billions of meters across, about the size of the head of pin. It's not difficult to see why reconstructing the full picture of all the connection is in a human brain is such daunting tasks, and one that we have no real hope of accomplishing anytime soon. The amount of data required is gargantuan. I checked it earlier, but I forgot. I'll check it again.
Gargantuan.
Gargantuan, gargantuan, gargantuan. To store a high-resolution architecture of single human brain would require a zettabyte of capacity. That's the same size as all digital content on the planet right now. Throwing far into the future, let's imagine that we could get a scan of your connectome. Would that information be enough to present you? Could this snapshot of all the circuitry of your brain actually have consciousness? Your consciousness? Probably not. After all, the circuit diagram which shows us what connects to what is only half of the magic of a functioning brain. Now, the other half is all the electrical and chemical activity that runs on top of those connections. The alchemy of thought, of feeling, of awareness, this emerges from quadrillion of the interaction between brain cells every second, and the release of chemicals, and the changes in the shapes of proteins, the traveling waves of electrical activity down the axons of neurons. Consider the enormity of the connectomy, contomy, and then multiply that by the vast number of things happening every second at every one of those connections, and you'll get a sense of the magnitude of the problem. Unfortunately for us, system of this magnitude cannot be comprehended by the human brain. Fortunately for us, our computational power is moving in the right direction to eventually open up a possibility, a simulation of the system. The next challenge is not just reading it out but making it run. As such, a simulation is exactly what a team of researchers at the Ecole Polytechnic Federal de Lausanne in Switzerland is working toward. Their goal is to deliver by 2023 a software and hardware infrastructure capable of running a whole human brain simulation. The Human Brain Project is an ambitious research mission that collects data from neuroscience laboratories across the globe. This includes data on individual cells, their contents and structure to connectomy, contomy, data to information about large-scale activity pattern, contomy, data to information about large-scale activity patterns in groups of neurons. Slowly, one experiment at a time, each new finding on the planet provides a tiny piece of a titanic puzzle. The goal of the Human Brain Project is to achieve a simulation of a brain that uses detailed neurons, realistic in their structure and their behavior. Even with this ambitious goal and over €1 billion of funding from the European Union, the human brain is still totally out of reach. The current goal is to build a simulation of a rat brain.
I was checking related to my goal tracking. I was reading like since 2 hours. It's been 2 hours that I've been reading and doing as live streaming as well. So I have taken challenge of reading every day 3 hours and doing streaming for 2 hours, and so it's been completed. Like 2 hours is been completed right now, but on my toggle track it was not showing that I have completed it or not, because I missed a tag where when I start my time tracking, at the time I need to add tags. Now, those will recognize my goals and will assign the time particular to the goals. That is how the tracking works. Like if I show you, like here, this is the goals, book reading, salesforce development. I'm a salesforce developer basically, so I work as a salesforce developer, so do work every day for 8 hours, and YouTube streaming. So these are my challenges that I have to take on. I have taken it and I have to complete all of these everyday streaks. It makes me very excited when I see 1 day streak, 2 day streak, because I have already shown you guys that I'm reading one book. Like I've been reading books. Like it's been more than 23 days now. It's been 14 days. Like as you can see, it's extended to your 23-day reading streak. So today it's a 24th day of reading. So I'll be completing this as well. And like it's been like completed for 24 days, but for you guys it's first day. So reading with you guys, it's my first day challenge, and I'll be completing every day. So that is why I started tracking it in a toggle track, so that I can see like now I have completed it or not. So that's all about for today. Like we have read till now, like it's been 271 pages. I'll be reading these completely in my first, like I still have 1 hour to read, so be reading it. If you want me to read this whole book with you, I had these, like I have these streaming just for a testing purpose. Like I wanted to show myself to you guys. Like right now I can see no one is seeing it, but even though it's a literally different experience than reading by my own, because I know there could be some people or there could be someone who can watch this, because after ending my live stream it will be on my YouTube channel. So anybody who is visiting my YouTube channel, or let's say if someone looks at this YouTube streaming, then they could have seen it. So this is just for testing purpose, as well as this is my first streaming as a challenge, first reading with you guys. Like I started reading in middle of the book, because I've been reading the same book for the last 2 days. So after this streaming, like ending a streaming, I'll be continuing reading this book, because I have to complete 1 more hour of my reading challenge for every day. So if you want me to guys read this complete book, I'll start reading it again from tomorrow or day after tomorrow. But after this after this first day challenge, to from tomorrow I'll be reading a very new book that will be continuing every day. So that's all about for today. Thanks for being staying with me, even though there is no fun, but I have to say, because one day there will be people, because reading is very interesting and people like it. There are lots of people who likes it, and right now they don't have this channel at handy, or they don't know about it. Then someday definitely they are gonna get to know, and they will be with me, reading with me simultaneously. So that's for now. Except this, I want to really tell about my channel is that this is not only about reading a book, it's all about self development. Like I am going to have challenges like reading a books, explaining the things. This is also a challenge, because most of the time we are not able to explain the things, we are not able to convey the things to people. That will also be the challenge. Like going on tricks, like I'm saying randomly, I don't have anything in mind right now. Like we can go on treks, we can like just explore the world, how we can grow together. Like that is my main purpose here, to create this channel and upload the videos. That's all about for now. Thank you for watching, and